we'll go ahead. Welcome back, everybody. For Mindset 3, Mark Moore is going to be presenting that. Robert and Eleonora are on a flight right now between Stockholm and the UK. I think they're headed to London. They would have liked to have been here, but Mark is stepping up to cover their topic. And we'll go ahead and turn the mic over to Mark.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Welcome all. We're going to talk through Mindset 3, which is profiles. For me, I'm a consultant, program manager, trainer out of Raleigh, North Carolina in the US. This is an important mindset. And again, as we've said, you'll see things building. We know that we're going to continually battle against the core elements of genetics and environment. You see those at the center of this diagram. But one of the most valuable tools as we attempt to shape and overcome choice and environment is choice. Choice matters, and it matters often more than any of us want to believe. It's an intrinsically personal factor, much like motivation. When I teach that, I'll say, I can't motivate another human. I have to find what motivates them and then find ways to leverage that. And it's something that we rely on to function day to day, hour to hour. We make choices. We've all made choices to be here at this particular time. We battle genetics. We live through our environment, but we choose how we approach both of them and whatever else we face as we try to affect change in any or all of the four lenses. So choice kind of uniquely starts at the individual. And then, as you've heard in the previous talks and in the ones upcoming, it permeates through all four lenses as we leverage those choices. If we were to go back and study the construction project that resulted in the Empire State Building, and Mary Poppendieck did a great talk on that about a decade ago now, you'll quickly see that they were constrained by multiple environmental factors to block size of the footprint that they were doing, had to be in the building to have it rented before May 1st of the following year. But rather than constantly fight against those constraints, they leveraged the tool of choice in an effort to help them clearly establish goals and plan out a trajectory that actually resulted in one of the more remarkable feats of architecture, engineering, construction. And history is filled with examples of how choice in response to environment and genetics can turn circumstances that would have held someone or something back into an advantage that actually accelerated the end results. And that's the power of choice and realizing how much agency we have over it and finding that it's among the one of the most valuable lessons we can learn. On a more personal level, we recognize that profiles, and we think of those often calculated and reported via some instrument such as a DISC or Myers-Briggs, matter, but they rarely focus on choice, especially choice in the moment, and often we find they're transient or temporary. Reality always factors in. It either creeps in or rushes in, and the choices you make when that happens will often trump your environment or genetic factors that most of these commercial profiles will tag you with. So in order to effectively deal with the various elements that comprise profiles, you're going to need to think more like what we call a fund manager and establish a longer lasting strategy. And we'll get to that as we progress here. As we look at an increasingly VUCA environment, we see, go ahead, Andrew, advance that. We see on the left here results of a fairly recent Gallup survey, and we're seeing a higher level of disengagement. It's quickly approaching 80% disengaged on a global level. And disengagement is often the biggest asymmetry you're going to face. However, if you look at the second set of numbers below that, you'll I was astounded to see that despite a huge disengagement, over 30% of the respondents said that they were still thriving. And we know that they were facing a lot of daily worries and anxiety, stress, anger about their situation, and they all play major roles in what's going on in our lives. However, as we look at this factor and look at the growing disengagement and how it fights against vision, mission, purpose of an organization, we know it has a big impact, but it is starting to drive choice in ways that we haven't seen before, and it finds its way into each of the four lenses, very often beginning at the individual level. So on the right side, as we think about thinking like a fund manager, the best fund managers, and Andrew has actually talked to some, will say when they select a group of funds to manage as a group, they're going to limit their picks on the extremes. If they were to bundle into, say, a group of 7, they're going to find one that would almost guarantee a stellar ROI. That's going to be the shining star that they look for. They're going to have 3 or 4 that are going to perform decent, probably market average as things progress. And the rest of them are going to be likely to underperform, maybe some negative ROI, but ultimately in this mix, the star, the choice to pick something that really, and not pick 7 that appear to be stars, to really pick one, do the research and make the choice where one of them is the star, actually begins to carry the others. And then anything else that the other 6 funds produce ends up being gravy. So if we look at the law of averages for these factors, you really expect 14% of people and circumstances to be, quote, on your side in order to push you towards success. So we've got 30% thriving, or even the 20% engaged. I've got to make up a gap there, because there's a gap of anywhere from 6 to about 15%, and that gap aligns with choices, and ultimately choice remains at the center of everything. As we said earlier, it's something over which we have a great agency and we can leverage to our advantage, and that includes a choice not to do something. Robert Heath cited Deming. I'll quote Deming this afternoon and put a quote up on the screen, but Deming at one point, one of the fathers of quality, said, it's not necessary to change. Survival is not mandatory. So when we think about choice, we have to incorporate even the choice not to do something. Because as Deming said, survival is not mandatory. I could choose to back off. And that probably doesn't mean stagnancy. That means I'm going to get left behind. So the question remains then, how do I leverage the choices? And how do I take agency over the choices in front of me? Knowing that there's a whole lot of factors going on, there's that increasingly VUCA world, and it all plays into the other mindsets that you're going to hear about throughout the day. And sometimes it's a choice to just go back, revisit, and adjust. Sometimes it may be a choice to walk away and go try it somewhere else.
Really good. Thanks, Mark. As I was listening to this, I was thinking, wow, it would be really interesting if we could get the statistics on how people's profile impacts their engagement, because what I suspect behind this 33% thriving, even though 21% are engaged, the other 12% are able to thrive because of choice, and because they may have a profile that helps them thrive despite their circumstances.
I think there's probably, even anecdotally, you wouldn't even have to go to the scientific numbers. Anecdotally, there's probably a lot of right behind that, because it really does come down to making choices, and that starts at the individual lens, and then you permeate that back around through your team, through your product, and ultimately through the organization.
Hey, Andrew and Mark, good morning. Not coming
Morning,
on camera,
Glenn.
not coming on camera just yet, because we're getting ready for the game and kind of. Anyways, but Mark, there's a very, very interesting study that I just saw this morning. We're all gonna have to reference it because it's about the 4-day work week, but the study did talk about the choice of how and when to choose to utilize those 4 days. And in a lot of cases, it wasn't about just taking 40 hours and cramming it in 4 days. It was even reducing down to 32 hours and making that choice across multiple days, and giving people that feeling of engagement and feeling that empowerment to do your better work. And it was all about measuring productivity and measuring, in some cases where companies were able to increase their revenue, in one case over 38%. So, just like what you're saying, and so much of what we always talk about all together, all of these things connect to things like this empowerment, this engagement, this choice.
Yeah, some 20 years ago, I took an AMA multi-day course in marketing, and at the end of that, we were presented with a scenario. We were working through about 3 product lines, a small, medium, and large, and the company had great success with the medium, and our team actually came up with a proposal that says, well, that's our specialty, let's raise the price on it. And the instructor said and they would get the funding to do that, because we had taken the bold step by choice to say, this is a differentiator. We may or may not make money on the others. Let's focus on the one where we've got a distinction and we can sell that for a higher margin because we're better than everybody else.
Cool. Were there any questions from the participants on what we're talking here and what we're talking about? I'm assuming everybody's had the chance to do a personality profile. And one of the things that everybody needs to be aware of is that those are valid for about 30 seconds after you take it. And we have example after example where a person had a specific profile and a life event happened. So that would be an environmental change that was traumatic. And the person's personality profile literally flipped in the assessment, so that if you put both assessments side by side, they would say this isn't the same person, even though it was. And so we need to remember that, and this is why we don't go overboard about personality profiles and why we emphasize choice, because you can overcome both your genetic dispositions and your environment through choice. That doesn't mean it's going to be pretty.
Yeah, if I know my high ground that I'll retreat to, I can make a choice when to enact that and when to continue to engage.
Yeah.
And as we said, and Andrew has said it before, the disengagement is becoming one of the most prevalent asymmetries that anybody can see. And you see the stats are there from Gallup.
Yeah.
It's pervasive.
Well, as anyone who's trying to get anything done in an organization, when you see these numbers and you say, okay, 21% are engaged, that means 4 out of 5, they're not with. And so we're already working and we're behind. And so the whole thing is, how do we get everybody moving the right direction and loving it? We have a minute left. Did we have any last minute questions or observations or comments? Cool. Oh, Chris.
I'll just say really quick that I find this whole conversation very liberating. And like you said, it might be ugly, it might be messy, but we have a choice, and we can make a difference through that choice. I found that very liberating.
Cool. Alan, you were gonna share something as well.
Yeah, yeah, I want to agree with the previous speaker that yeah, it's quite encouraging because like I recently did one of those personality tests, and I got something that was completely different from what I've gotten in the past. And looking back, I've always gotten different results, and I think that's been based mostly around my life situation rather than something that's set in stone.
Okay, great. And that's the thing to remember is when we're looking at this, the environment can change. Your genetics don't really change, as if I understand genetics correctly. I mean, we're sort of stuck with what we got. But the environment part, we have a little more control over that, but not totally. And then the only thing we can choose to do is how we respond to the first two. And if life hands you lemons, go ahead and make lemonade, and just keep pushing forward. Excellent observations. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording here. Thanks, Mark, and thanks everybody. Good stuff.